looking for escapism, I just want to escape.
Welcome back to my disembodied voice. In today's video, we are going to look at one of cinema's great visual interpretations, a famous trope of horror and an ability which can come alive under special effects. Telekinesis. First of all, what is telekinesis? Well, to put it in the most simple of terms, telekinesis is the art of being able to move objects with little more than thought. Or, to put it into even more layman's terms, it's the ability to physically move objects by mental power alone. My new book, due out next year, is actually about telekinesis, and it's something which fascinates me and, truth be told, if you gave me the option of any superpower, I would take it in a heartbeat. It's worth noting that you may have heard the term psychokinesis, and while psychokinesis is still classified under the same definition as telekinesis, psychokinesis can also come under the banner of mind control and thought manipulation. However, for today's video, we're classing them as pretty much the same thing, as it's the ability we are focusing on, not the terminology. Now, despite what magicians and YouTube videos say, there is no scientific proof that telekinesis exists, so I hear you ask, what has this got to do with real-life psychology? Well, the reason I want to do a video about this subject is because when telekinesis is portrayed in the movies, it still has to be congruent to the character motivations, use appropriate non-verbal communication, affect both the user and victim of said telekinesis, and, most importantly of all, adjusting a focus to the point of moving something via mental thought requires a harmonious psychological state, mood, synergistic and symphonic portrayal. Now, we are going to look at multiple characters today, from Carrie White to Darth Vader, the boys in Josh Trank's Chronicle, as well as Lucy and the X-Men, and I'm going to acknowledge that their psychic gifts have different contexts and explanations, such as, I know Magneto can only manipulate metal and not control someone's mind or throw any random object, and the Jedi and Sith from Star Wars are able to manipulate things with their mind due to bonding with the Force, a Zen-like synergy of nature and mystical energy which surrounds and flows through everyone and binds the universe together. However, although Darth Vader's use of mentally moving objects and choking people is a far cry from Carrie White's gift of telekinetic projection, itself an allegory of puberty, they both manipulate the physical world via thought, so it all goes in here today. Anyway, let's crack on. A while back, I did a video about the 1976 and 2013 versions of Carrie White, which produced some strong reactions in the comments from fans of both versions. Now, sticking to the telekinetic massacre alone, one of the reasons I felt Sissy Spacek's interpretation was so superb was not only the fugue state that she appeared to slaughter the entire prom within, her stares and sylph-like movements are so very odd and haunting, but the fact that her abilities were all communicated through non-verbal methods such as her eyes. Each thrown table, venomous fire hose, or any of the burnings, throwings, or extraneous locking of doors was conveyed through little more than a concentrated glance or a mean stare. Even when she flips the car which tries to run her down, it's done with a sharp look, and this adds both a vicious supremacy and frightening omnipotence to her ability. With her face frozen in a permanent expression of shock and a stasis of hatred, being drenched in blood also adding to her menace, Spacek's face was one of someone who had snapped and her ability had fully consumed her, now all reasoning was gone. Being in a fugue state of motionless ascendancy, her mind dissociated from reality and thus unleashing the hatred for those who have mercilessly bullied her for years, Spacek was a vessel for an ability now so toxic it was spewing out of control, and her slaughtering with people is done with ease. Was she in control of the ability? Was it in control of her? Or did they both work synergistically to show the real power of the massacre? Contrast Spacek to the wavy-armed Moretz, who initially screams and then appears to be struggling to close doors and loosen electrical cables as if barely coping with basic Jedi school. Her body language shows nothing of dominion or unfettered antipathy, and her non-verbal cues, where she points or waves at everything or grasps thin air as a metaphoric motion, it appears to take away from the raw power of her ability. Now, remember that 70% of all communication is non-verbal. This means how we look, move, our faces, body language, and everything that goes with it is crucial to being congruent and convincing. For example, when I used to work in a psychiatric hospital and one day a visitor attempted to intimidate me, he raised his arms, bared his teeth, and then opened his eyes while staring directly at me. Now, it's hard to be menacing when your arms are folded, you're looking at the floor, or rubbing your leg nervously, and his non-verbal cues were deliberately aimed at dominance and control and intimidation. Anyway, back to Spacek. Her non-verbal communication and framing in the close-up shots is to be dominant and let her eyes communicate all the rage and venom she can muster. Her mind is so powerful that she doesn't need to use her hands as she is out of control, destroying everything around her, and she is a bomb now detonating wave after wave of destructive energy, which is just razing kids to the ground and ripping away furniture and cables with ease. For Moretz, her arms and gritted teeth appear to show a reticence and struggle to use her ability, and, compared to the flag-moving scene in a classroom much earlier in the film, where she ruffles the material amidst a sneer of pride over her freakish ability, it's oddly underwhelming for a final showdown. Now, if Moretz was firing energy bolts from her hand, then that's a different matter, as the arms are the source of the power, so they need to project and dominate her posture. However, as all of her projection comes from her mind, it's her face, head, and expression which conveys the horror, power, and rage. Always remember that what we are feeling is conveyed through our non-verbal communication, and, when pushed too far and mentally snapping, our face needs to mirror, or at the very least, show a sense of comprehension, if dissociating, as we cannot see telekinesis, and the flying furniture is only 50% of the effect. For Carrie White, her ability has just exploded and, through concentration, focus and dissociation, she is now relishing in her revenge after years of systematic humiliation and abuse. However, there are times when some hand movements help, but let's stay with the motionless concentration and look at Darth Vader during the Bespin duel of Empire Strikes Back. In this scene, Luke Skywalker has left Jedi training early and rushed to save his friends and thus fallen into Darth Vader's trap. Now, already struggling but just about holding his own against Darth, Vader decides to spice things up and begins showing off his much more proficient Force use by hurling chunks of metal and machinery at Luke until he is blown clean through a window. Notice how Vader at first looks at the items he throws, but once in the ascendancy, lowers his lightsaber, and the more he focuses on Luke and Luke alone, he takes control over the naive Force user and hurls everything. Now, to use the Force, as Luke is shown earlier in Jedi School, one has to bond with it and focus. It's using a state of Zen, if you will, so that the Jedi or Sith can use their feelings and mental strength to manipulate it. For Vader, now bashing his son with random parts of the scenery, his power is amplified by showing a calmness amidst a squall of flying objects, clashing sabers, and escalating rage. He has fought with Luke, but now showing the importance of being Force sensitive, his strength is amplified by the lack of movements we see, and everything he is doing is via mental thought. Again, like Spacek, notice how Vader's head is central to the framing as, with all these things flying around and battering his son, sorry, I should have said, spoilers, Vader is at the centre and in control. One needs to focus with the Force, and that's what we see. Now, not all uses of the Force require a withdrawal of movement and body language, and, early on in A New Hope, we see Obi-Wan mind control a stormtrooper. Here, Obi-Wan waves his fingers ever so slightly, and this is really important, both mimicking a wiping motion, as he is wiping one thought and implanting an order, and also showing a literal sleight of hand. The first finger wave is all that is needed so the audience can tell that he's using the Force to mind control someone. Remember, when Star Wars came out, we didn't know about the Force like we do now, so it was crucial that we saw the differences and nuances in how it worked. Here, Obi-Wan is showing a wipe of a thought, pushing out the stormtrooper's volition and replacing it with his own, but also the precision and ease of how he does this. The phrases such as, "So easy I hardly lifted a finger," "I could do that with one hand tied behind my back." The use of hands can show how easy something is, and, for Obi-Wan, he is showing his psychokinesis as he is calm and controlling a situation which doesn't need rage, and he also has mastered incredibly well. The The fingers signify precision, and it's a similar case for Vader when he is force choking his general. In this scene, the general is mocking the force, so Vader shows just how real it is by constricting his windpipe. It's important we have movement in the context of this scene as, able to turn this man inside out but wanting to show the gentle yet fatal nuance of the dark side of the force, he pinches his fingers together in a gesture to show the audience the precision of what he is doing to the general's windpipe. In The Empire Strikes Back, Vader releases the full power of the Force on someone on a completely different ship, or at least several walls away, with little more than a stare. Think of when your parents were angry and you expected them to shout at you, but instead, they just gave you that stare. Breathing deeply, looking you in the face, their expression revealing nothing. How much more scary is rage when held within the incongruence of restraint? Like I said, non-verbal semantics and visual communication holds even more power than auditory and verbal. One of my favourite scenes of all time, though, regarding telekinesis is from X-Men First Class, when Magneto is hunting his nemesis, Sebastian Shaw, the man who made him by twisting, manipulating, and ultimately killing his mother in front of him. Magneto was abused within a concentration camp and, after revealing his barcode to 2 former soldiers he is now drinking with, he does some rather painful things with a knife and a gun. Let's take the gun first. Now we know Magneto can control metal with the power of his thoughts. However, the man rushing to aid his friend doesn't know this, so the barman appears with a gun, but, with little more than a stare, Magneto moves the pistol to the right and executes the first man. He does this beautifully and, again, see the framing of his head and lack of movement, see the eyes, showing the proficiency and rage that he does all this with little more than focus. As mentioned before, telekinesis comes from the mind, so the face, eyes and framing of the head is crucial. After using a knife to kill the other man, Magneto recalls it back to his hand with ease, before then calling the gun to his hand via telekinesis and finishing his killing spree. When the older Magneto escapes from the plastic room in X2, we see varying degrees of brilliance to his telekinesis. Magneto senses metal, so when Mr. Lorio arrives with too much iron in his blood, Magneto uses hand gestures as a form of stop, raise, and pull. In control of the situation, and not consumed by rage, he uses non-verbal semantics to control Mr. Lorio's levitation, and also, much like Vader's choke, the hand is there to show nuance and control. He is now physically pulling the metal from Mr. Lorio's body, and he's doing this with glee, as this man has beaten him and tortured him for months. So, why not just do all that with little more than a tilt of the head? Well, there isn't a reason of why not, but here, Magneto is showing that he is feeling something, the metal, and so uses his hand to show this. Also, preventing another beating by saying no. His hand motion is the gesture for stop as he holds it out, then raises his victim and, using his fingers as if pulling something metaphysically, he pulls the iron out of his victim. Then, folding his arms to a more relaxed posture, he lets his metal bullets do their magic before his fingers mimic a gun and he fires his little bullets at the remaining guards. The key is the mood. When someone is in control, the hands can be used as a physical gesture of holding something. However, the raised hands are a representation of the metal hold, and Magneto isn't struggling to move things here with his mind, so the hand gesture is merely that, a gesture and metaphor rather than an accentuation of showing psychic difficulty or merely pointing at what he will control next. Yes, X-Men has varying levels of Magneto's ability. Days of Future Past sees him pulling metal bars up and inserting them into the Sentinels, and I feel the gestures here offer little more than theatre, but overall, when Magneto's skills are being shown over the movies, the non-verbal language is congruent, effective, and adds to the menace. As stated with Vader, Spacek, and even Magneto, power is the key here. Telekinesis is all about power, control, and the fact that it's a rare and occultic ability that no one else has. Therefore, the more focused, limited body posture, and use of framing of the head as the main point in the frame, the more we feel their proficiency and fear for the protagonist or marvel at their power. In the Luc Besson film Lucy, Scarlett Johansson's Lucy absorbs some funky sherbet and then starts using 100% of her brain capacity. Now, yes, the film is silly and the idea that we only ever use just 10% of our brains is little more than a myth, but when Lucy's powers are about to reach their height, she develops a wonderful penchant for mental manipulation of the physical world. Now, I'm going to ignore her ability to feel every living thing and also change her hair colour as if she were Mystique, and focus on one scene as this is a decent representation of telekinesis in terms of non-verbal communication and mood congruence. Now, there are plenty of telekinetic scenes, including a car chase, but the one I want to single out is where she retrieves the case following an order to kill her. Lucy is stood facing a legion of heavily armed men before she flings all their guns to the ceiling using her telekinesis. Then, as each man tries to kill her, she walks through this legion of flailing arms and impotent punching, sending each person to the ceiling before retrieving the case she needs. It's important to look at her body language and everything else in the scene. Lucy feels that, with her increasing brain capacity, she is becoming less human and losing her humanity. So, now nearing 100% brain capacity, which will be at the end of the film, she is monotone in posture, blank face, and her power can now manipulate everything around her. So, to show the futility of the men who are trying to kill her, she remains still, stoic, and walking slowly whilst the assailants flail their arms around her with zero impact. The assailants look ridiculous and stupid. Lucy's non-verbal impassivity shows power, control, and an almost godlike presence as she manipulates the world around her. She isn't in a rage like Carrie, and she isn't taking personal revenge like Magneto. She's losing her sense of self and humanity. Her physical, non-verbal posturing, parallel to the ridiculousness of the people trying to punch her, shows her control over a spiralling situation. In Josh Trank's Chronicle, we follow a story where young teens get telekinetic superpowers. Straight away, the dynamics change here, and so should the interpretation. In Chronicle, these guys are both childish and juvenile, whilst their discovery and enjoyment of their powers is based around humiliating people, getting a look under girls' skirts, or doing jackass levels of self-punishment with baseballs. However, mixed with wiping cars off the road to fighting an entire SWAT team, Chronicle shows telekinesis as something both which can be a toy, something which moves from infancy to mastering, and, most of all, mixes the correct non-verbal posturing to its awesome power. Now, it's worth noting that the boys in Chronicle are not too far off Carrie's age, but there are subtle differences and nuances which set them apart. Firstly, lead character / villain Andrew is male, so there is a more masculine level to his aggression, and he is learning to use his telekinesis over the whole film, whereas Carrie's appears very sporadically and then spirals out of control only when her entire brain shuts down upon the epitome of humiliation, and she enters a state of dissociation where her emotional side shuts down. Remember, trauma overrides the executive and logical sides of the brain, so once they are gone, all we have is the primitive and reactive side. For Andrew, he has been physically abused by his father and bullied at school, and his ability makes him into, his own words, an apex predator. So his rage increases whilst he is in cognitive control. Also, at the end of the film, already injured and in hospital and then injured again by a great fall, he is in physical pain, and his telekinesis is affected by this emotional and physical pain. This is why, when he screams, windows smash and he breaks everything in view but with no precision. He uses his arms as gestures to blow cars away, but he is hysterical and his power is misfiring in all directions, and his physical actions show movements of focus and concentration of where he is projecting his power amidst this spiralling descent. Andrew is hysterical, unreachable, lost to primitive emotions, but not dissociated. So, whilst Carrie stands and massacres with great precision and power whilst remaining ethereal and still, Andrew is out of control and in agony, so his actions mimic his mental state. Coming back to Moretz in 2013, I always felt the incongruity of her wavy arms was about showing she seemed to be struggling to move things or gritting her teeth in great effort, where telekinesis, in its rawest form, is liberating and a focused power which, once mastered or consumed by, uses the less is more because the power is coming from the mind, and this is what needs to dominate the screen. Eyes and focus of someone while lashing out says everything. When Indiana Jones is punching someone, we get accentuated sound effects and flailing arms and movement because fights are physical and kinetic. Telekinesis is also about kinetics, but it's from a mental projection, and so it needs a different portrayal. There are too many films to narrow down every single acuity of telekinesis, but the point of this video is to highlight the need to show the parallels and paradoxes when using telekinesis. Now, there is no official blueprint for how things should be done, and there are no 100% accurate portrayals of a fictional and scientifically impossible power, but it's important that we remember our non-verbal body language, mood congruence, and the true depth of detailed and proper character writing is showing them being congruent to their mental state. Also, the use of the mind is all invisible. There are no beams, rays, or snake heads bursting out, so the expression needs to match the motive, and also the use of fingers and hands are crucial details when used at the correct time. There's a reason Thanos snaps his fingers whilst wiping out half of life. It's because of what the snap of the fingers symbolises. It symbolises ease. A snap of the fingers is how you call someone slavishly. It's how you show ease, and it's something which takes minimal effort, and yet, if you are the one who has to respond to a master or customer clicking their fingers quite patronisingly, it really is quite demeaning. So, rather than sending a cosmic burst across billions of light years, Thanos just snaps his fingers and the deed is done. One snap, and half of life is dead. It's the gesture matched to the horror of what is happening. And the same theory goes for telekinesis. Why swing your arms to mimic the throw when the mind is doing it and you are showing ascendancy? Or, when mimicking something little, like Obi-Wan's Stormtrooper mind trick, the finger gesture is appropriate because it shows nuance, mimics ease, and offers a clear indication that these little changes in thoughts, scene, action is down to a single and slight manipulation. As I said at the start, telekinesis isn't real, but how it's put into cinema is, as, although the ability is science fiction, the way we act and portray things is a mirror to our understanding of non-verbal human interaction. Anyway, that's it for this week's video. Please like, share and subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment, as they always generate good content, or even leave a suggestion for a future video. And until next time, I'll catch you later.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.